This is part two of the beginning of my divorce story. If you haven't already watched the first part, go back and watch the first part. And if you can, go back and watch Mrs. H's video. She's inspired me to share some of my story. So, where we left off, I had found the pictures of women he had matched with on this dating site. The kids were asleep. We were cleaning up this mess from the basement, from the kitchen, of all the water everywhere. And we still had a lot of cleanup to do. So, and I was in shock, honestly, even with all the therapy, with all the other things, some of which I've shared here, some of which I haven't, but all the other things that had gone on in our marriage, I was still shocked. I was still really shocked. I honestly thought that if he was done, he would just end it, that he wouldn't cheat, that he wouldn't, that there just wouldn't be need because we'd talked about a lot of the problems. And he had also threatened divorce many, many times. So I thought for sure he would just end it if he was done. But I was wrong. So I'm sure the big question for a lot of people is, did I start screaming at him? Did I, talk about it all right there? I didn't, because again, I was shocked and we had this mess to clean up and we had to hurry up and get it done so we could get the kids up and get them ready for school, and I could we could both get ready for work, and there was just so much to do and I did not have time to process. So we did all that. And I just essentially just kept going. And he did not know that I had found this information. I'm going to skip some of the in-between right now, but I will say this. One thing that was really important to me as I realized clearly he is done, and I don't know why he's doing it this way, but clearly he is done. And we need to just end this marriage. So one thing I knew, though, is this was, I can't quite remember how long. It was like my last week of school. So it must have been like 2 to 3 weeks before Father's Day. And I knew I really wanted him to have a last good Father's Day. I don't know why. That just felt really important to me. I knew that no one in his family had been divorced. I knew this was going to be a really big deal. I mean, it was a huge deal for me, massive. But at this point, I was ready, and I was just still coming from this mindset of wanting to do what would be least harmful to him. Yeah, it's a little crazy, but at the time, that's where my head was. So I wanted to let him have a last really good Father's Day before I addressed this issue, unless he was to bring it up sooner. So we had Father's Day. I got him presents, had the kids, get him presents. We had a lovely meal all together as a family. It was a good day. It was a pretty good day. I knew what was about to come. But I just leaned into it as best I could. We put the kids to bed and came back down. And I think fairly soon after that, he started the conversation of thinking that we should, I think he might have said separate. And I was really shocked that he was starting the conversation. I did not think he was going to be able to do that. I didn't understand why he was doing it now and why he hadn't done it before. Mind you, little side note, I had realized, because I kept watching what was going on, and I had realized that he had lined up a date with somebody for the following weekend. So I knew we were at least going to probably have to talk about it before then. So in my shock, I just started asking him questions about separation to divorce, separation, wanted to know where his head was at. And I don't honestly even remember in this moment what his response was. I might have it written down somewhere. But ultimately, he just started laying a lot of blame at me. And, and just in general, how we had been struggling and whatnot. And I think he was starting to say, I think probably to divorce. And I just hearing him lob all this mud at my feet, it was getting like I was pretty patient, and again, I was still wanting him to have a good Father's Day, but at that point I said, well, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it probably is a better idea for us to separate before your date with, and I named the woman. And he was like, "Oh, I said, "Yeah, I know you've been dating, lining up dates and talking to other women and whatnot." At some point, I think before I named her, I said something and he tried to deny it. Like he was not doing that. That was not a thing. And I said, "Yeah, well, you have this date lined up with her, so I think it's probably wise for us to separate before you start that." And then, as best I remember, he then just slid into the reality of like, I know, and this is what's actually happening. And as if it was like, as if nothing had just happened. It was like the most natural thing to him. Like, oh, okay, I didn't realize you knew. And by the end of the conversation, we were talking about how we were going to divvy up furniture. And it was the strangest thing in terms of just, yep, our nearly 10 years of marriage and 12 to 13 years of being together. Let's just start talking about how, we're going to sell the house and divvy up belongings. This is already getting long, so I'm going to end this one here. But if you do want to hear more, the next part would probably start with where he pretty much immediately started asking me for dating advice and continuing to come into the bedroom where I was sleeping completely naked, looking for clothes, not understanding that that wasn't appropriate anymore. Anyway, let me know if you want to hear more about that.